Well, good morning, my friends. Welcome to another episode from our Aquarium Online Academy. My name is James. I work in the education department here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach. Now, if you're watching this morning, we're having some website difficulties, but if you're watching, that means you're on our YouTube page. If you haven't seen our YouTube page before, we have a YouTube channel where you can view all of our previously aired Aquarium Online Academy programs. So if you want to catch up on the last, 5 months of information, great. I hope you got a lot of time on your hands because we've been teaching about a lot of stuff. Well, today, Carrie's going to be answering questions for you. If you're watching, you can text in live at 562-286-1838, and we'll answer your questions live on the air. If you're watching after this is live, so today is Wednesday at 9 a.m., you can still email us questions live at lbaop.org. You can email us questions, or if you have a really interesting question that needs a longer answer, you can also email those in too, and our educators will get back to you and help answer your very curious questions. Well, today we're going to be talking about baby animals. All the cutesy things. You ready for some baby animal pictures? I know you are. Are there any baby animals in here, though? Do you see any babies in Blue Cavern? Not really. But how would you know? What makes you think it's a baby animal or not? Because this blacksmith is actually pretty small. Thank you for being a model for us, blacksmith. That blacksmith is maybe this big. Does that make it a baby animal, though? That's a good question. How do we know something's a baby animal? Well, we're going to show you some pictures of different baby animals, and we're going to take a look at why are they different? What makes them look like a baby? Think of a baby person or a puppy or a kitten. How do they look different from the adults? Well, their proportion is different. Baby humans have a pretty big head compared to their body size. It's like we kind of grow into our head. And our limbs get longer and our torso gets longer. And then we look like we do when we're an adult. So it's not vastly different from when we're babies. But we change proportion, we change size. It's kind of the same for puppies and kittens, isn't it? I've seen plenty of puppies that have to grow into their paws. Their paws are huge. Or the kittens are really poofy and fluffy. So they change shape. Now does this look like a baby animal? It is quite small. This is a plastic replica blade of seagrass. Can you tell if it's a baby or an adult? Let's keep thinking. What would tell you that this is a baby animal or not? Now, I will tell you that some of the smallest seahorses on the planet, the dwarf seahorse is only about this big. Those babies must be super duper tiny. So size alone shouldn't tell you it's a baby or not. All right, so we've kind of solved that one. That blacksmith, even though it's a little one, if it was a baby, it'd be very tiny. Even if it starts tiny, or it only ends up this big, it starts really small. So size could tell you a little bit, but it's not the only part of the answer. We should look at more information. So here's the adult. This is the dwarf seahorse, the smallest of the seahorses. It's also the slowest swimming fish. You can imagine being only about an inch tall would take you a long time to get from point A to B. But seahorses also don't have very big fins. They only have a couple off to the side right here and one on their back right there. That helps them swim. For the rest of the time that they're hanging out, they're pretty much doing this. They have a prehensile tail. It means they have a muscular tail that can grab stuff like a monkey. They can grab onto the seagrass and just hold on and wait for food to show up. They don't have to chase their food because they can't swim very fast anyways. So if you're just hanging on, waiting for something to happen, that's kind of what seahorses do. They could swim a little bit. We can actually watch them swim sometimes, but they're not very quick. They do chase their food, but they don't have food that moves very quick either. So now here's the juvenile. Do you see how there's a little bit difference in the shape of the body? Their snout is a little shorter too. And the way that they would feed, so since we're talking about their snout, is that their mouth is really long and almost has like this trap door set up. So they'll open their mouth real quick and vacuum the food in so fast the food can't actually get away. So they suck it in really quick. And it's called snicking. So a snick is when they open up their mouth, they kind of lurch their head forward, open their mouth, suck in their food really fast, and they get to swallow their plankton prey. They'll eat things like brine shrimp or copepods, or I forget all my names of uh, plankton. There's a lot of plankton, but there's a lot of different things that they're going to eat too. Now, our seahorses here, we feed a combination of frozen and live plankton. So if you're a baby animal, you have a very tiny little mouth, you need to eat little tiny little food. So we grow some of our plankton here called brine shrimp. Now here's an adult Pacific seahorse. This is one of the tallest of the seahorses. They can get anywhere from like 7 to 12 inches long, I think. And their nice, lovely tails kind of curled up, and he's just kind of sitting there. So if the current is slow enough, they don't have to hold on to stuff with their tail. But when we're growing food for them, we will grow the brine shrimp or sea monkeys from the egg, hatch it up to 2 days old, and then pour it in the water for them to feed on. An adult seahorse like this size, about this tall, we would need to feed larger plankton to. So something like krill. Now, the biggest krill is kind of like the biggest or the size of your pinky finger, but there's other krill that's pretty small. So we can feed frozen krill that we thaw out, and we just kind of disperse it, scatter it into the water, and then they can eat. So how do they learn how to eat? That's also a good thing to think about. Let's go to an animal where mom actually teaches the baby what to do. Let's talk about birds. A lot of fish, they'll brood or hold on to their eggs, and then when they birth them, it's like, my part's done. You're now a fish out in the water, you go be a fish. But other animals, it takes some time for the baby to grow up and learn how to be that animal. So birds, mammals, and some fish actually hold out and wait with their babies for a certain amount of time before the babies go off on their own. Most of the other fish and other invertebrates, they just disperse their young, and their young just instinctually know what to do right away. Now, this is a black-necked stilt. We have two here, George and Gigi, that have been able to have multiple clutches or groups of eggs, and we get to watch all the babies grow up. Now, they grow up pretty quickly, though, but let's take a look at what they look like right after they're hatched, and they've got their big, fluffy, downy feathers. They look like this. Do you recognize any differences? What did you see as a difference between the baby stilt and the adult stilt? Well, in this case, size is important. We can tell mom's a whole lot taller than the babies. What else do you notice about the differences between their bodies? Their proportions are more similar than like a human adult to baby, but the wings on mom tuck in pretty nicely. The wings on the babies, they can't fly yet, so their wings are not quite as well developed. You can see their little tiny wings sticking out right here. The color is a big thing. Where do you see these babies hanging out? Is this a lush green space right behind them here? Ah, that's sand and gravel. At the shoreline where they would be hanging out, these babies need camouflage that help them hide in the sandy shore of the wetlands. So mom can go fly away. She can use a type of counter shading, so she's dark on the top and light on the belly to hide where she needs to go. But the babies, when mom's out hunting for food, the babies have to stay behind and stay hidden. So a lot of animals, the babies will stay in the nest or wherever they were hatched or born from, and they wait for mom to come back. So while they're there, they need some adaptations or abilities to survive. Now this is kind of cute. Does this bird have extra legs? What's going on with our bird right here? Maybe our super observant friends out there can see what's going on. There's extra little legs, and there's this little fluff right here under mom's wing. So the babies hang out right underneath mom, just like a lot of babies do. They hang out with mom. And this is one way that mom can protect the babies and kind of hide them from a potential predator, is by sitting underneath them. Now, in other cases, other birds have very different needs for when they're babies. What kind of bird is this? This is not a stilt. A penguin. Were you thinking of a penguin? Penguins, when they're first hatched, are all kind of gray, weird fluff. But as they grow up, they get what we call juvenile plumage. The other birds get that too. So the stilts, when they grow up to like teenage years, you might consider, they're more like the color of mom, but they still have some coloring that tells you this is a baby. So that is a common thing that happens too, is that when they're hatched, they have very different color of feathers. They get their juvenile plumage, and then they get their adult plumage. birds go through a lot of color changes. Now, let's take a look at an adult penguin. We're trying to look for some adult penguin stuff. Now, our penguin cams, the penguins have been kind of inactive because they're going through a molting season. So we talked about how they change feather colors. Well, penguins do this once per year, called a catastrophic molt, because they drop all of their outer feathers in 1 to 2 weeks, grow them all back, and then they are all happy and healthy again. But it's not like they're unhealthy, it's just they're very uncomfortable. So if you imagine you had to shed all of your outer layer in one fell swoop, it'd be very, very uncomfortable, especially since they can't swim as much when they don't have their outer feathers. But it's also very scratchy and itchy on their skin. So the penguins, when they reach a year and a half old, they go from their juvenile plumage to their adult plumage. Now, our Magellanic penguins are one of the banded penguin species. So they look like this. They have bands around their chest and their head of color. Now, different banded penguins have different number of stripes. Ours have one black stripe here, and around their head they have one white stripe. So this is the adult plumage. You see how there's a big difference in coloring between that baby that we saw in the person's hands and the adult right here? Think about why we have to have, why else besides hiding and camouflage? Why else do the babies have to be so different? Why do the adults have very specific coloring when they're out in their habitat? A penguin is an oceanic animal. They don't fly. They have to go hunting in the water. And to be in the water, just like that black-necked stilt, they're using something called counter shading. So a dark top layer and a light underlayer. So either it could be their back and their belly, or it could be the top of their head and the underside of their body. There's counter shading to help them as they hunt. The babies don't hunt, so they don't need as much counter shading. So this is the juvenile plumage. This is like the teenage years for a penguin. Not quite as defined of stripes right here, and almost no stripe on the belly. So these are the younger penguins that are up to a year and a half old. And they'll look like this until that catastrophic molt, and then they're going to look like all the other adults. So when you see our penguins, you can tell if it's a juvenile or if it's an adult. Now, the very, very young babies, we don't have them on display. When they hatch, they're about this big. And very quickly, they reach adult size this big. There, you can see both my hands now. Go from that to this. In a matter of 4 months, they grow up very fast. Other animals, they don't grow up nearly as fast as birds do. So here's the band around their chest, one black band. Very proud looking penguin. And now the adults, remember, they have coloring to hunt. The juveniles, they have enough coloring that they can get in the water and they start learning how to be penguins because the parents kind of help them out with that. Or as a colony, as a group, they help each other out. But other animals, they don't really brood or care for the young for long periods of time. And that's okay. That's part of how nature works. So when you look at care of animals, birds and mammals tend to have long-term care compared to other species. So they have a lot of care, and it's like a teeter-totter system. They have a lot of care, but not as many babies at once. Mammals tend to have, at least humans, generally one at a time. Other species, they have a few, maybe a half dozen at a time, but they hold on to the babies. They hang out with them for a very long period of time. If you're looking at things like that seahorse, they don't have a whole lot of care. So here's a mammal, here's a baby that will stay with mom for many months. So this is Kaya, the harbor seal. And Kaya started as a big baby, but she had to wait and learn how to be more of a seal from mom. Now, because she was born here, we're also training her and working with her so that she's comfortable with our health care, with people getting into the exhibit to feed her, and feeding in the way that we need her to feed so we can monitor her diet. So babies, even though they're here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, they still learn from mom what to do. So remember, mammals, lots of care, not as many babies. Fish, not as much care, lots and lots of babies. The giant sea bass can have a lot of babies. One female giant sea bass from that Blue Cavern exhibit, they're actually way up too tall. You couldn't see them in that camera. The giant sea bass can lay over 1 million eggs in one clutch. That's a lot of eggs. But do all 1 million eggs get fertilized and survive? That's the catch. So fish will often have lots of eggs in one event. They don't take care of them. They lay them, they kind of leave them alone, and then that's it. And they'll have thousands to millions of eggs, but not very many are going to survive. It takes a lot of effort to survive to this size, 3 to 4 feet and a few hundred pounds. Other fish, though, they're actually in this exhibit. That's great. We'll take a look at the seahorse. So the seahorse does the same thing. Lots of babies in one event, but they don't really take care of them after they're hatched. Now, do you remember how seahorses have babies? What happens? How does this baby get into the ocean? Well, mom starts with the eggs, and then the eggs get fertilized. Then she gives them to the dad. The dad has a pouch in his stomach, almost like a kangaroo, but not exactly. There's a pouch that they will deposit the eggs into, and they will hold on to the eggs until they hatch. When they hatch, he'll birth them and release them out into the water. Now, to show you just how small some of these babies can be, if you know your metric system, this is 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters is like take 2 pinkies and hold them together like this. The 2 ends of your fingers together, that's about 2 centimeters. That's how big your fingers are. So it's either like together like this or together like that. That's a little baby. But we've had them even smaller. Now you can see all the little fin flare that they have, the size of their snout, the proportions are different. That happens a lot with babies. The proportions have to change as they grow up. But they'll have a lot of babies at once. They don't really hold on to them for too long, and then they're gone. Actually, when our seahorses have babies, we have to remove them from that space so we can take care of them ourselves. We give them the little brine shrimp. We put them in a special tank of water called a chrysal. So a chrysal, if you imagine a disc or a circle in front of you, there's a gentle current that's moving it up and down. That's kind of what we do. So here is a chrysal that we're using with our giant sea bass. This one's not a true chrysal. It's called a pseudo chrysal or a fake chrysal because it's flat like a plate. If it was a true chrysal, it would be a lot more round like a bowl. But this one works for a lot of baby animals. We want this gentle current moving around so that their food is moving and that they're moving. Neither one are getting stuck somewhere. Now, when we were taking care of the giant sea bass baby, we had to make sure that it was healthy and able to grow up. We do the same thing with the baby seahorses. We're making sure they're healthy. We're feeding them a lot. We'll give them a lot of nutrients to make sure that they're healthy. They also get really, really clean water. So we're making sure that that water in that space is very healthy for them. So they get very closely monitored. Now, the giant sea bass was kind of a fun and interesting one because they're endangered. And we were able to get them to have eggs. And one survived long enough that we were able to get a little baby. It looks exactly like the adult, right? Not even a little bit. Well, maybe a little bit. But there's the adult. Now, at that size, about an inch, that was, I think, almost 3 or 4 months of age. It takes them a while to grow up. So the birds, they grow up real quick. They go from little tiny hatchling to juvenile adult size in months, 4 months. Our giant sea bass that was born, Utaka, is now, I think, 3 years old. Utaka is about this big at 3 years old. Giant sea bass get about 5 to 7 feet long, and we don't know yet, not even halfway there in size. And it's been 3 years. Well, they have a long lifespan. It could take them a long time to grow up into their adulthood. So that's something else to think about. Babies growing up quickly may mean that they don't have really, really long lifespans. Here's Utaka. So we can see some of those color changes from the baby. They're kind of more orangey brown, like kelp. And as they grow up, the spots become more apparent. The color changes to kind of a tan, darkish brown or gray. And as they grow up, they're going to start changing colors. But the lifespan can tell you a little bit about their baby selves too. So people have an average lifespan right now of about 75 to 85 years old. Depends on where you are. It takes us a little while to grow up. That fish, similar lifespan. Giant sea bass will have almost human scale lifespans. It takes them a while to grow up. What about a penguin? A penguin might live under human care 20 to 30 years. Probably not nearly that long out in the ocean. So they need to grow up quickly so they can be out and on their own, independent, and able to go be a penguin on their own. Or a seahorse will grow up pretty quickly because they need to go out and be a seahorse out on their own and then grow up and have their own babies. So the cycling just also kind of depends on lifespan too. Now, jellies are an interesting animal that have babies. We have lots of jellies here, and we get lots of baby jellies here too. But they grow up very fast too. It takes a very short amount of time for a jelly to turn into an adult jelly, and then one we can put on exhibit. So our Jelly Touch Lab here is really unique. We have a special caretaker that grows these lovely cloud-like creatures, and they grow up so quickly that we can add more jellies to our jelly lab if we need to on a pretty regular basis. Now they start microscopic. So imagine that seahorse started very small. Think smaller for a jelly. This part is where they can sexually reproduce. They can have male and female that will have babies, and those babies are microscopic, little tiny planktons. But even this phase is kind of small. Now this is a different adult phase. So the baby's jellies, this is a baby jelly, and that's a baby jelly. What happened in the middle here? Okay, I'm glad you asked. So, little larva, it's a baby version of an invertebrate. The larva lands, grows into a new type of adult called a polyp. The polyp grows up and clones itself and makes a different kind of baby. The baby has to grow into the jelly we think of. So they have 2 adult phases and 2 baby phases. That's kind of cool. They're a little bit different than other things that are animals that we think of how they have babies. This is the polyp phase. The adult. This is an adult. It's only this big, but this is an adult too. So sometimes the baby to adult phase is also very complicated, even for a simple animal like a jelly. Now, Concha's asking, why does the fish change color when they grow up? That's a good question. There's a lot of animals that change color as they grow up. Let's go back to a picture of the baby sea bass. And let's think about coloring while they're babies. So we'll get back to jellies in a little bit, but let's take another look at those giant sea bass. Remember we talked about how babies, they don't move as fast, they aren't going to leave a nest area as much, they're smaller, so they have to protect themselves. Now, one way to do that is by camouflaging. So, the color of a baby sea bass is going to kind of tell you about where it lives. So this color doesn't look quite like the rocks, doesn't look like the seagrasses, but it's very similar to the seaweed or algae that they live near. So they live in a kelp forest habitat, which is an algae, and algae can be brownish gold color just like this. But the very cool thing, Concha, I'm glad you asked about baby colors, these spots on the baby stay the same. The spots will change maybe size, but the location is not going to really change. And so we know when giant sea bass are little tiny babies, we can take their picture, study their picture or their dot orientation, kind of like a connect the dots kind of picture or a constellation. And now we can follow that baby and take its picture as an adult and compare the dots, and we know who it is. So that color, Concha, helps them hide among the seaweed. Other animals, their color really helps them hide too. Remember the baby birds? They had the kind of speckled pattern that helped them hide in the sand along the wetland shores. So coloring when you're a baby can help you really be hidden. Now, even when they're adults, this color pattern helps them hide. Giant sea bass are not the fastest of fish. They will sprint to catch their food, but they're not super duper fast. How many sea bass are in this picture? Since we're talking about color and camouflage, can you find all the sea bass? Well, we have this one. That's a freebie. That's like the center square on a bingo puzzle. Well, there's one right here. Now, I've seen different frames of this photo, and in one frame, we could count up to 5 giant sea bass, because there's some that are hiding out back here in the kelp in the murky water. So murky means it's not very easy to see through. In the murky water, in the kelp, more were hiding. So these spots help break up their pattern. So if you think about camouflage, camouflage can help you perfectly hide because you look exactly like the thing behind you. Or camouflage makes it tough to see your shape or outline while you're in the water or while you're in your habitat. So if you can break up the outline, that's great. Now you can't be hidden or you can't be seen. Now, I'm going to show you a baby picture. It's going to take a little bit to find it because it's not easy it's not right in front of Amanda's face. But Amanda, if you can find the baby Garibaldi, we're going to show you why some baby colors do not fit what we just said. So we talked about how adults and juveniles need to camouflage in order to hide either from predators or from their prey. But other babies, they don't care about that at all. They want to be as brightly colored as possible. Well, that's a very different idea. Have you seen Garibaldi before? Garibaldi, or they're super red-orange, brightly colored. And part of it is because they have a big attitude. Garibaldi might only get about this long, but they will scare fish as big as giant sea bass. So Garibaldi have a big attitude. They're related to the clownfish. They're in the damselfish family. And damsels have a big attitude. The males will protect the nest. So this is one of the exceptions to those rules of, oh, fish don't really care for their babies. In this case, the males will create a nest. They'll guard the nest from any other animal that gets too close to it. And the eggs that are laid there by the female, she'll leave the eggs alone, and he'll come along and he'll protect them. Now, this is a baby Garibaldi. It's got even more color than the adults. How is this baby supposed to hide with all these colors? Trick question. They don't hide. Ha! Wait, what? The babies have this bright blue color on their body to signal to the other Garibaldi, like, nope, don't worry about me. Just passing through. I'm not a threat to you at all. La la la, bye-bye. The babies will pass in and out of territory of the adult male Garibaldis, and this color pattern is like, I'm neutral, don't worry about me. So for them, they can be super brightly colored, and it's okay, because other fish are like, don't mess with the Garibaldis. But so that the Garibaldis don't harm each other, the babies have special color to prevent the other adults from kind of harassing them or even potentially injuring them because they get too close to a nested territory. That's an interesting change of coloring. So sometimes colors for camouflage, sometimes it's signals, signaling I'm scary, or you don't want to mess with me, or hey, it's okay, I'm not here to do anything but pass through. So colors are a pretty interesting aspect of juvenile or baby cells to adult cells. So I hope that answers a lot of your questions, Concha. Thank you for texting in with us today. Now, we are also going to be talking about some more fun stuff today. What was our next class on? The octopus. Amanda's going to be teaching you more about octopus. Now, we don't have any pictures of octopus babies, but the couple minutes we have left, we should show you probably the cutest baby, I feel, in our collection of pictures, and that's the baby flamboyant cuttlefish. The cuttlefish are cousins to the octopus. They're in the cephalopod group. So you have octopus, squid, nautilus, cuttlefish. These are baby cuttlefish. The cool thing is their color is almost the exact same as the adult. There's no color change from juvenile to adult in this species. The other cool thing, you can watch them, their tentacles end up so big and strong, they just kind of walk around on their tentacles. They can swim. See, this one's swimming. They have a little fin that goes around the edge of their body, kind of where this yellow spot is at. You can actually kind of see it flapping in there. Yeah, they're doing an undulation motion so that they can swim. And the babies, these babies are probably 1/4 of an inch long at most, maybe 1/2 an inch on the big side. But they're pretty small, and we've been able to have flamboyant cuttlefish have babies here. Now, as cute as they are, they unfortunately don't have a long lifespan. So the cephalopods have a shorter lifespan, which means they have to grow up fast. Remember, long lifespan, potentially, that baby takes a long time to grow up. Very short lifespan, they have to grow up very quickly because they need to get to adulthood, be that animal, and eventually have their own babies. So that's one of the cool things about flamboyant cuttlefish is they have a very quick turnaround, but also they don't really have a different color from baby to adult. They start small and they grow very fast. Now, the maximum size of a flamboyant cuttlefish is about 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches if you're like the LeBron James of cuttlefish. I don't know. But they don't get very big. Most cuttlefish are on the smaller side compared to the octopus we'll learn about in 30 minutes. Stay tuned for our 10 o'clock program for Aquarium Online Academy. And thank you for joining us this morning to learn about baby animals. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.